So yes, today I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done in terms of analytics with the men's basketball team at Loras College. I'm going to try not to go too much into the specific projects or the specific statistics, but more just give an overview of how we were able to implement analytics in a D3 team when there's not a lot of resources, there's not a lot of data. So the ways that we've kind of overcome those challenges and been able to provide some information to the team. So as mentioned, I started my freshman year, so in 2016, a new coaching staff came in my freshman year, and they wanted to use analytics. They're all young guys. They like analytics, and they wanted to see how it could benefit the team. So year one, I was a freshman. I somehow ended up getting to work with them, and there was a senior analytics major that was also working with the team. And so the two of us went to only the home games. The only tool we used was Excel. It was really, really basic. Basically, we just collected some simple data and gave the coaches a little bit of information. And so not a lot that was going on our first year, but the first year of the program. So the second year, it was just me because he graduated. So I'm a sophomore. And I wanted to do a lot more than what we had done. So I went to almost every game, traveled with the team. I was at basically all the practices. And I had recently gotten hired by John Deere in Dubuque, and I was working with Tableau software there. So I started to learn a lot about Tableau, so I decided to implement that into the work we were doing. So then I was collecting data and storing it in Excel and creating some simple visualizations in Tableau and kind of creating these basic reports for the coaches based on whatever they were looking for. This past year, again, we were going to most games and practices. I started to learn more in R, and so I wanted to incorporate that as well. And I also had a lot more experience in Tableau after working for John Deere for a year. And we also, another person decided to help, so there was a team of two of us instead of just me. So that lightened the load just a little bit. And then this year coming up, we're planning on, we've got a team of three. We've also got a couple other people that have been interested, expressed interest, but there's not a lot of room to travel and stuff, so they're going to help us kind of with data collection, some of the initial data cleaning. I also learned a lot about different, so Shiny I learned about this summer, and I am planning on incorporating that. And so also because I'll be graduating, I'm going to be working on improving the capabilities that our assistants have so that they can take it over next year. I don't want this to end with me. So I'm going to explain some of the current work kind of through the framework of an example project or a couple example projects. But basically right now we have to collect data because in Division 3 there's like almost no data available to you. And if it is available, it's not pretty. And then the analysis and the reporting that we do for the coaches. So data collection, most of it is manual data collection. So this is an example of the fields that every possession during the game, this is what I'd be collecting. So I'm just like furiously typing behind the bench because this is a lot of stuff to collect on a possession. And so I'd have two guys sitting next to me and they'd call stuff out so that I don't have to actually watch the game. So I've been to basically every game in 2 years, and I don't know how much I've actually seen of the team play, but I'm there. And then we also collect similar stuff through film, and this is most of this information is stuff that the coaches wanted us to focus on because we want to play fast, and so they wanted to see if we're getting the ball across half court in 4 seconds, if we're getting the shot up in 12 seconds. They wanted that kind of information so they could break down what we're doing based on that. Also, shot score is something that the coaches we developed. It's pretty rudimentary, but basically just like this would be, so we look at the shot score, we give it a rating 0 through 3 based on whether it met certain criteria, and basically we would determine, okay, was this actually a quality shot? They were uncontested, the play that we ran worked, was run correctly, and then we're taking a shot either behind the 3-point line, like right behind the 3-point line rather than 4 feet off or whatever, or we're taking it in the paint. So those were like some of the criteria that we used, and we're working on making that better because there's a lot that this doesn't explain. Next, this summer I wrote a script to scrape from Synergy. So Synergy is where most of the data for college basketball is stored. The NBA has it too, but this is where we get all of our data basically. but it's hard to get that data. So I wrote, using R Selenium, I wrote a script that basically will go scrape the tables based on whatever team you give it or whatever game you give it, brings it back and cleans it so that we can actually use some of that. And then R Shiny location charting. So as I explained, I got into R Shiny a little bit, and so I'll explain that a little bit later. But we wanted to be able to create shot charts that are better than what I'll show you first, where we're just using kind of generic locations. We wanted to be able to use the actual location, so we created a app that will actually do that. We can have that capability while also collecting this information. An example of some of the analysis we did recently, we were looking into, we wanted to analyze our defenses, our weaknesses on defense, and where we should focus those efforts to gain some ground on those. And so we analyzed over 5,000 spot-up possessions and 2,000 cut possessions from the past season within our conference, because those were the two areas that we were weakest. And we wanted to see, and we kind of determined, we made the assumption that if we defend spot-ups really well, that means we're guarding on the perimeter. That means there's a lot more opportunity for a cut, a backdoor. But if we're sitting off and protecting the middle of the court, that's going to give it a better opportunity for a spot-up. So we were analyzing just these two, and we were making the assumption that if you're defending one well, the other one you're more susceptible to the other. And then we used about 2,300 spot-up possessions to determine the average points scored on a spot-up shot, because obviously with a cut, if you make the cut, it's going to be 2 points because you're in the paint, but there's a chance for spot-ups to be a 3 or a 2. So we analyzed 2,300 possessions and saw that it was actually about 3/4 of the time that it was actually a 3-point shot instead of a 2-point shot on spot-ups. So then what we had to do was calculate the expected points per possession. And so with cuts, you're looking at the points expected would be 2 times a made field goal, and then over the attempts, the fouls, and the turnovers, so the total possessions, plus if they were fouled, then the free throws made. Well, for spot-ups, it shouldn't be 3 times the 3-point field goals made, it would be 2.75. That was the number that we've discovered was more closely related to what actually determines the points we can expect off of a made shot, times the threes. And we didn't include free throws because if you're defending a spot up correctly, you're not jumping into them as they shoot and you're not fouling. So we're hoping that's not happening. The last thing we would have to do is calculate the expected possessions that we can expect based on whether we're defending one or defending the other. That's kind of impossible, at least with the data we had. So all we did was look at the averages for our conference, and we took the first quartile. If we're defending the spot up really well, then we're hoping that it's on the lower end. But that means that the other possessions are going to cuts, and then vice versa. So we calculated those out. And essentially all this was done so we could at least predict which one is more important, which one can we expect to give up more points on, and so that one is the one we should focus on more. We basically determined that team by team is going to change so much that we're going to just focus on base principles, sticking with the defense we're running, the pack line defense that we run, and then we're going to just analyze. We're basically going to do this analysis again for each team as we come up while we're scouting them, because it changes so much based on the teams that we play. Some teams basically, like there's one team taking like 1,000 spot ups a season and basically no cuts, and so it's like obviously we're going to want to change based on that. So essentially we kind of came up with this. We did all this work and we realized, okay, we're just going to have to do this a bunch of times throughout the season because it doesn't really, there's no rule for each team or for each for the overall teams in our conference. For reporting, as I said, we use a lot of Tableau just because that's what I know. And so basically when we're scouting, we watch film and we're collecting specific things that the coaches want, and then we're just making visualizations like this. So post-game, we're looking at stuff like this, and we're giving the coaches, we're just showing, okay, so this was against Nebraska Wesleyan. They were number 1 in the country. We have the luck of them being in our conference, so we get to play them all the time. And this was actually in a game that we beat them on our home court, but we were looking at the adjustments we made in the second half obviously had something to do with our success, because our 3 top scorers all improved significantly in the second half, or they performed significantly better in the second half than the first half. So we're looking at things like this, and then we go back and look at what were we running in the second half, and how do we make those adjustments, and how can we look to do that in other games. And then this is kind of just an example of when we're doing these, we create these visualizations, we create a report like this, and we just put in the visualizations. We provide some information on what the data we were using was, and what we look to, what our analysis is, what suggestions we have. But because the coaches are pretty willing to listen to that, but they also, we know that they're obviously smarter and they're going to make the better decisions, so we just give them some sort of information. So with the season coming up, it starts in a couple weeks, and throughout this summer, I've been doing a lot of working on increasing my capabilities, but this season we're going to try and increase the capabilities of the entire analytics program for our basketball team. And so these are just some examples of the stuff that we're preparing to implement this season, so that we can have a little bit more automation, a little bit less time spent collecting data, cleaning data, and presenting it, or putting together reports. We're going to have some of this stuff that just kind of happens automatically. So one example is our shiny dashboards. So this is what I was saying. These are basically how we create our own shot charts right now. We have just generic locations. I wanted to create it as like a map, but I don't know how to do the mapping part. So if anyone knows how to do that, teach me. But so basically using ggplot and putting the court behind the plot, we created shot charts like this. And I'm sure there's better ways to do it, but this is the way we were able to figure it out. But then we include something like this on our scouting and our player development dashboards. So with the scouting, we're using that synergy scraper, and using it based on the team that we have coming up. We can pull that data from synergy, because that's where we're usually getting this information in the first place, to create the scouts. So we're going to be able to create a dashboard that has an overview of the team, and then overview of each player based on the information within the synergy, and so this is going to be something that we're developing right now. Basically, we just have to figure out the functionality of running the synergy scraper and importing it, so that the dashboard can just have that information, rather than having to, when you open the dashboard, load it up and it has to go run the Firefox and go actually, because our Selenium runs the browser, so it's all messy. But we're working on it so that our scouting platform will be more like a web interface, and you select the team and then you can break it down by player, and you can go more in depth on these things without having to spend time creating specific charts or specific graphs for each player. It'll be more automated because of that data we're scraping. And then player development, because we're at practices and we collect a lot of stuff there, we can collect stuff at games. We're able to use kind of the similar thing with the shot charts, and it'll be similar to the scouting, where we can look at players from their freshman season to their senior season. We can look at how they grew in games and practices. We can look at them from just the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So we're working on putting together sort of a dashboard that'll show all the different ways that these players, whatever we want to focus on, we can look at that. And so that's kind of the nice thing about the shiny dashboards, is that we can customize it to specifically what we're looking for, rather than if we were using someone's software that we purchased, it wouldn't have as much of the opportunities to customize it that way. And then, this is the location chart that I explained, that we created. So basically it's just a plot with the image on it again, and we have our inputs that we collect based on every possession. And so this is obviously slow enough that you wouldn't be able to do it in a game, but when we're watching film we can do this. And then you basically just click the chart, or the court based on wherever that location is, and it'll collect those coordinates. So then we can submit, and they all get stored in a data frame. So throughout, while we're watching film, we can do this for each possession. Then we just export, and we can then load it back into the either the scouting or the player development or just in a shot chart, and we're able to just create that shot chart and have specific locations rather than those generic areas that we haven't been able to. They don't tell a lot, and so this is just a way that we're able to kind of overcome that part where we don't get those. The NBA has like fancy software that does this for them, and we want to do something like that, but obviously it's expensive, and so this is our kind of our workaround. And you can tell where I got that. The header that's the same header I use for everything that we all do, so not very creative. Last thing is the growing team. As I mentioned, so me and this is the assistant that I had this past year, and we've got a guy that sits in between us, and he watches the game. He basically just shouts things out so we can type them on our computers. This year we're adding another person to actually collect data with us and analyze data, and then we're going to have a few people that have come up and said, I want to help out, but I'm kind of busy. I kind of have other things that I'm going on, but I want to at least get in and start learning, and there's a lot of data collection that we need help with, so they've agreed that they'll sit down a couple nights a week and watch film on games that are coming up and collect data so that we can actually be providing the coaches with more specific things rather than this is what I was able to find on Synergy. If they're curious about how do they defend like on-ball screens or what do they do in this situation, we can actually be collecting that data by watching film, and there's going to be a couple more guys that are willing to help us out with that. And then we also have a couple student managers like him that'll help us out on specific things that the coaches want so that when we go to report to them at halftime and tell them, okay, these are the things we're seeing, you wanted us to look at this is what we see. We've actually got guys that are helping us get that ready so that quick turnaround where we basically have 2 minutes from the end of the half to getting into the coaches' room to show them something, and the 2 minutes that we have or 3 minutes that we have to actually tell them something, we've got guys that are helping us get all that ready so that it doesn't take as much time because we're still trying to like type out the stuff that's still happening in the game. They're getting stuff ready for us to show them at halftime, and then like as I said, there's people coming to us all the time. So it's a small D3 school, but we've got actually there's more seniors, managers, and analytics people than there are on the basketball team this year. So we've got all kinds of people that want to help out, and Loras has an analytics program. They just added a data science program, and so there's tons of people in the school that are interested in this stuff, and the fact that we get to actually apply this to a team and get that experience while we're in college, it's definitely taught each of us a lot about how this stuff actually works, and it's kind of helped us be creative in the ways that we can make up that ground on the resources that we don't have because we don't have the money, so we can't have this. We don't have access to the APIs, so we don't have all this stuff. So we're able to kind of create our own way, our own workaround, and it's kind of made it creative. But we also are learning this software in the process. So overall, as I said, implementing it to a D3 program requires support from both the coaches because they have to be willing to let us do all this, and they're helping us out, and they're listening to us. Like we actually get to implement stuff because they want to know what we have, and dedicated students that are coming every semester, and they want to know more and they want to help out. So we have a big team because overcoming that lack of resources has been difficult. It started out difficult when it was just 2 and then me, but every year we've gotten more people that want to help out, and we're overcoming that. And we've kind of learned through that. I've been calling it strategic data collection. I don't know where I heard that or whatever, but we're collecting as much data as possible in as little fields as possible because we don't have, it takes so much time to collect data that we have to learn ways that we can collect more information without having to watch film for hours and hours and learning different ways to overcome that. And then just some highlights from the staff, or from the basketball team since my freshman year, since we started doing analytics. 60-22 record. This past season was our best finish in school history. We made it to the Sweet 16, and we've beaten we have 3 wins over top 15 teams, thanks to Nebraska Wesleyan being in our conference, and we somehow beat them at home every year. So, thank you. And follow me on Twitter. I tweet a lot of stuff, sometimes basketball related.
Do you know if there's any other teams in your conference that have the data analytics team?
As far as our conference, tournaments, I haven't heard. I haven't noticed any, at least while we're at the games. There's never seems to be anyone on the other sides, but I have heard from a couple people at different colleges that they have an analytics club and that they're kind of starting to partner with the basketball team. And so it's definitely been growing in Division III. I've heard a couple people that are starting to work on this, and so people have been coming for feedback and stuff, kind of ideas. So.
Do you get to ride? Does your team get to ride with the team on road games?
Yeah. Yep. So, and it's usually only me or only me and an assistant because there's not a lot of extra room. But if there's not enough room or something, then we're sitting watching the stream, which doesn't help when the Wi-Fi is so bad that we're missing possessions. But we usually get to travel. It kind of depends throughout the season. Luckily, we were able to go with them to all of the tournament games too, so it was a fun experience getting to do that. And, but yeah, the coaches they want us there as much as we want to be there, so it's extremely helpful that they're doing everything they can to make us a part of this.
As you go year to year and you play the same teams over and over again, are you looking for trends in opponents across?
Yeah,
teams?
and so there's some things that we've noticed we've been able to pull, like, okay, so Nebraska Wesleyan is one that they play the same style of offense every year, and so there's things that we look for. Okay, when we were able to beat them, or they only lose a couple games a year, so we have to use those games and say, okay, what was this team able to do? St. Thomas knocked them out of the tournament, so we're like, what did St. Thomas do that we can apply this year? It's a little bit difficult because, especially this year, we had 7 guys graduate, and 3 of them were starters, 5 of them played a lot. So it's tough because every year people are graduating and we're losing guys, we're gaining guys, but the team changes so much, and so it's difficult to do year over year, and we don't want to put a lot of emphasis on, okay, this is what worked last year, so let's focus on that. But we at least incorporate some of that because we realize that it's the coaching staff is the same and the main group of guys that are on the floor are the same, stuff like that. All right, thank you.